The administrators of the tower. These guys are practically the gods of the entire tower. We talk about how Jihad and the 10 family heads are like gods. The administrators are like the gods that made them gods. These creatures are absolutely essential to the Tower of God story and to the lore and the universe, so we're gonna break down what we know about these crazy, fantastical creatures, what they're doing in the story, and how they could impact the story going forward. Okay, so the first thing to get out of the way is that sometimes administrator is translated to guardian, and sometimes like Hansung or even Lei Ro are called administrators, but they're all different things. You've got the administrators, which are sometimes called guardians, like they're the real deal, the absolute rulers of the floor. Now, not ruler like Evankel, but like a step above. Remember the second floor administrator kicked out Evankel and Hansung because he was like, I'm done with you guys. So they're the top dog. They're not the ruler of the floor, they're like above, they're a step above ruler, they're the administrator. And then you've got test administrators, which are basically the ones that carry out the tests, like Mule Love and Lei Ro and etc. And then the test supervisor is like the one in charge of those people, like Hansung on the second floor and a Gus on the 20th floor. Overall, these creatures have been here since practically, as far as we know, the beginning of time, at least as far as the tower's age, like the beginning of the tower. You know, we don't know anything that says otherwise, and they were here when obviously Jihad and the 10 family heads entered, with the first administrator that they ever met being Hedon, who greeted them at the first floor. I mean, I could make a whole video about Hedon. I'll mention him sporadically through this video. The one thing you need to know about Hedon is that he is the caretaker of the tower and pretty much, as far as we know, like the top administrator, because this guy gets some special privileges. Okay, so administrators rule over the Shinsu. They're in charge of the Shinsu on every floor. That's why in season 1, Bomb made that contract with the administrator to use Shinsu. Now, the interesting thing is, Bomb, being an irregular, did not actually have to do this, which is why the administrator tells Bomb, these are gonna be more like a shackle to you. Like, you making this contract is more of a shackle than freedom. And it's because he's an irregular who doesn't need that contract. However, everybody else essentially needs to make a contract with the administrator to use Shinsu. You can use either one, guardian or administrator. You have to make that contract. Now, if you're from one of the 10 families, you're sort of born with that gift for using Shinsu, so you don't technically have to, but most of them still do. You know, it's kind of like a customary thing, but this is why on the 43rd floor, the floor of death, you don't need to make that contract because obviously the administrator is kind of dead. So the Shinsu, it's kind of wild, you know what I mean? Like, anybody can go there and use it, but of course Hell Joe, being like the new sort of administrator, but not really, but he was using like the pipes and everything to control the Shinsu. But under normal circumstances, if the guardian is dead, you don't need to make a contract. But that's sort of their thing, right? They give and make contracts, which I'll get into later because they're also in charge of the tests on every floor. Now, the weird thing about this is that they aren't really anymore. When Jihad and the family heads entered, they made contracts with every single administrator climbing up, and we know a little bit about those contracts, like the immortality contract, for example, on the 100th floor. But essentially, Jihad established this system where the administrators are still like the top dogs on their floor. However, now like humans, or at least, you know, like other people, like residents of the tower per se, are the ones in charge of the tests. Even though the administrators are still technically like the overseers, they don't really handle the tests that often anymore. But you can still request to take one of these old tests, one of these administrator tests, which is what Bomb does on the second floor to try to let Rachel pass. And normally only irregulars are allowed to take these like special tests, but Bomb was able to request that the other regulars also participate. So yeah, basically administrators are, again, they're the top dog. They can make their own rules. It's not like, oh, only irregulars can take it. It's like, no, they can do whatever the heck they want, and obviously Bomb made a big enough impression on the second floor guardian that he was like, all right, sure, I'll give you what you want. So yeah, it's all politics when it comes to like what the guardians and the test supervisors and admins are like, you know, what their relationship is and such. But it seems like for the most part, they're content. You know, we really don't know the specifics, like why are they okay with this? Because it seems like with their power, if they wanted to, they could potentially do something about it. Now, what's interesting too is that they aren't allowed, or I don't even know if they're able to leave their own floor even if they want to. As far as we know, they can't, with the exception of Hedon, because Hedon is the one who chooses regulars, so he's teleporting all over, bro. I'm telling you, Hedon's the one pulling all the strings. This guy, he's the big bad, I'm telling you. Now, these guardians were considered immortal, gods by the residents of the tower. They're things of legend, you can't kill these things, etc., etc. But that's not the case, because our boy Enryu proved them all wrong by committing the only murder of an administrator that we know of ever to date. He killed the guardian of the 43rd floor, and it shook the tower. This was so much of a big deal that it shot Enryu immediately. This was like the only thing he had been known to do, immediately to the second spot of all rankers, because this was unheard of. Let's talk about these contracts. So like I said, you can make a Shinsu contract, which you have to do pretty much in 99% of cases. If you're not an irregular, or you weren't like born with that gift, which is extremely rare, then you have to make a contract. Even if you have an item that uses Shinsu, you have, like if you're wanting to manipulate Shinsu in any way, you have to make that contract. So if you remember like the wand that can control Shinsu and items like that, lurkers like little button with the Shinsu hand, like you have to make a contract for like even those items. If you want to control Shinsu in any capacity, you have to make a contract, and that contract has to be made every time you enter a new floor. And I think you can essentially do it through your pocket, or like it's not like that difficult or anything. However, you have to do it pretty darn frequently from the first floor all the way to the 134th, except for the floor of death. And like I mentioned before, that 100th floor administrator gave the 10 family heads immortality. They made an immortality contract. We don't exactly know the specifics about like what that contract was, whether there was a downside to it, like what do the admins have to gain from doing this? We don't really know. But Hendolak Bloodmatter is the only one who wasn't given this contract, and we don't know why, but his children were punished for it. They're not going to live very long lives, but in exchange, he does live forever. It's like a weird thing, but like, we don't really know. It's really strange. The admins sort of work in like this different realm. It's almost like these contracts are like, I don't know, like they're able to like how do you do that? How do you make it so that someone's kids don't live forever, but it makes them live for, like, what? They're definitely in their own world. Like, these guys are nothing like anything we've seen in Tower of God. And it's kind of strange because we've only seen like 3 administrators, right? We've seen Hedon, obviously, and we've seen the second floor administrator. And then in flashbacks, we've seen the administrator that Enryu killed. But aside from that, like, we hear about these admins, but we've been, up 50 plus floors, and we have only seen like 3. So these guys are very secretive, they're doing things their own way, and it's pretty fascinating. Now, what's very interesting is that Jihad's contract is even a step above his 10 family companions, because his contract means that no resident of the tower can harm him. Now, the way I interpret this is that even though all the 10 family heads have immortality, they can still be harmed. Now, I don't really know like why that would really matter, because you're still not really gonna die, but Jihad can't even be harmed. Like, he can't be touched. As far as I can tell, that's from what I'm seeing everywhere in the research, Jihad is truly immortal. Like, immortal and invincible. Now, obviously, that's Jihad post 100th floor, and after becoming like the king of the tower. This is sort of like a king contract is how I see it, but still, it's pretty crazy. This also ties directly with like Rack and people who are super huge and need to compress their size, Evankel as well. You have to also make a contract to be allowed to do that. I would assume because you're also potentially using Shinsu to do that, but I thought I'd mention that too. Now, SIU has stated that all of these guardians or administrators, they're all like unique, they all have their own personalities, they're not the same, but it is worth noting that all of them are like creatures, Shinwei, divine sea fish, kind of. They're not divine sea fish, but, the second floor administrator and the 43rd, they've both looked like these giant fish-like beings, like giant whales almost, but like monsterish whales. Hedon is different. I mean, he kind of looks like a shark rabbit, but, it is worth pointing out that I'm not really sure if that's like the consistent like thing about them is that they're like this fish creature. We don't really know because we've only seen 3 of them, and Hedon kind of breaks that mold. I guess he's a shark. Does that count? And yeah, the administrators, they rarely ever intervene, but they will do so if it's gonna jeopardize the tower or jeopardize their system. So like if rankers are like slaughtering regulars, like they're gonna jump in. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of a big deal. I mean, you can maybe get away with one or two, but if you're like shaking up the tower, they will step in. Which is why the second floor guardian stepped in with the whole Evenkel, Hansung, and Jihad's army thing. But yeah, overall, that is essentially what we know about. I could go into more detail with Hedon, because I'm telling you, this administrator is not like the others, in my opinion, because he is known as the caretaker of the tower. Like, this guy was the first person that Jihad and his companions saw in the tower. Like, that is terrifying to know. Like, this guy could have been pulling strings and plotting stuff since the beginning. Like, bro, what is going on with him and Rachel and etc. I mean, I made a video talking about like secrets that have not really been revealed in Tower of God, unsolved mysteries, right? You can click the card if you want to find out more. But like overall, man, Hedon and these administrators, honestly, all of them, quite fascinating, and I can't wait to see more of them in the story, because I'm telling you, when they show up, it rocks everything. I'm wondering if maybe they'll show up in the nest. Probably not. I mean, maybe. It's hard to tell because most of the nest is rankers fighting, so like maybe they won't intervene as much. But I mean, the second floor guardian intervened with Evenkel, and he may have had motives behind that, but overall, we'll just have to see. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more daily content, mostly Tower of God, leading up to this return. Guys, Tower of God returns in like a month, like less than a month potentially, or a month. That is nuts. That is actually insane. So you definitely want to subscribe because we're going to be making so much content about these new chapters. I can't contain my hype. And patrons, you guys especially, are huge in supporting the channel. A lot of them suggest videos for me to make. Like I made one recently on Wallhike Song, which was suggested by a patron. So thank you guys so much. You guys are seriously the only reason I'm able to make content. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, and with that, I'll see you guys in my next Tower of God video. Take care.